Welcome back to A Fresh Story, the podcast where we have conversations about brave decisions to start over again. I'm Olivia.
And I'm Jenny, and we're so glad you're here today.
Hello, sis. How's it going over there?
It is going very well. How are you?
I
never really know how to answer that question. I feel very put on the spot every time. I think I turn into a little bit of a robot.
It's only like I ask this question every single time we do the podcast, but okay.
By the way, maybe that's like classic middle child syndrome. Like, I don't know. Nobody's asked me how I am. How are you? But are you okay? Maybe that's what's going on.
Well, speaking of asking questions to middle children, today's guest
is he middle child?
No, I don't think he's a middle child, but I'm just about asking questions to children. I just threw in that you were a middle child.
I'm speaking of poor segues.
No, he doesn't. He's not a middle child because he only has one sibling. I think he said that on the podcast.
I think so too. That's why I was surprised.
Yeah. But about asking questions to children.
Okay.
Today's guest was somebody that I was fangirling over, musicking over, fangirling. I'm a girl.
No, that's.
I couldn't remember if it was like about them or you or. Okay. Anyway.
Oh, got it. Like he was a girl,
right? So I was fangirling. I have known about the Okee Dokee Brothers for, I don't know, a long time, 10 years since before, well, longer, 12 years since before I was pregnant, I think, with Weston when we discovered them. And Joe and Justin are the founding members, musicians behind the Okee Dokee Brothers.
Yep.
And again, because our life is weird, I got the chance to work with them in different ways, in different capacities.
Wait, I'm so sorry. Because our life was weird.
Okay, because I pushed in myself on working with them. No.
Thank you for being honest.
Actually, what happened, I will go back, is that we talk a lot about that I worked with Goo Goo Guru. And at Goo Goo Guru, we did a music registry. And at the time, I was listening to a lot of Okee Dokee Brothers with the kids. And so I reached out to their publicist, who I love she's not their publicist anymore, but she was, I think, their publicist for a long time, who was a wonderful person. And I became friends with her as well. And she had a lot of musicians.
Right. But you have a very particular way of being like, oh, you know, it would be great, a music registry. Because I want to get in touch.
You're going to use the word insinuating, and that's fine. I'll accept the insinuation.
It's very good. It's almost like Inception. Like you're like, oh yeah, this is the thing. This is the thing we're going to do so that we can get this person into our orbit. It's an amazing.
I like to see and I knew that they were up and coming at the time, and I wanted to be able to support them. They have since won Grammys, and they are globally known as this amazing children's musician, revolutionary in what they're doing. But anyway. Over time, I got the chance to get to know them. We've been to many shows of that. We took the kids.
We've been to many shows.
We've been to many shows, but
I think at some point they're going to be like, "Ma'am, you don't have any kids." To me, they're going to be like, "You need to stop." We wear
their gear. We have their merch. So, some people are excited to I don't know, get Lizzo on their podcast. I was excited to get Joe from the Okee Dokee Brothers.
It was exciting. He also was able to answer our long-standing family debate, which was, did they?
Can you canoe?
No, Can You Canoe in a Little Boat Movie for Two, which was, did they start in children's music or did they somehow end up in children's music?
And it was a really interesting story. Yeah.
Yeah. The answer was really nuanced and it didn't nobody won the debate.
Yeah, but anyway, so Joe came on, we talked a lot about his journey in music, his journey in sobriety.
Yeah.
And, kind of how they are revolutionizing the way we speak to children and the things we talk about with children. Obviously we'll link their albums, but you'll hear me fangirling about certain songs that they have, because I came with a list. I came with a list of songs. He was like, "Oh my God!" But it was a really fun episode, and we're really grateful that he took the time to come chat with us because they are busy guys traveling around playing music. So please enjoy the episode with Joe, and please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to A Fresh Story so that we can keep telling fresh start stories. As childhood friends growing up in Denver, Colorado, Joe and Justin were always exploring the outdoors. Whether it was rafting down their neighborhood creek or discovering hiking trails through the Rocky Mountains, Joe and Justin were born adventurers. Now, as the Grammy Award winning Okee Dokee Brothers, they have put this passion for the outdoors at the heart of their Americana folk music. Joe and Justin record and perform family music with the goal to inspire children and their parents to step outside and get creative. They believe this can motivate kids to gain a greater respect for the natural world, their communities, and themselves. The 5-time Parents' Choice Award winners have garnered praise from the likes of NPR's All Things Considered and USA Today and have been called two of family music's best songwriters. And we have Joe here today, and I'm personally this is like I'm fangirling, like mom girling, I guess that's what they call it. But I'm going to talk a little bit about how I found you guys. So my ex-husband was a bluegrass musician, and when I was pregnant with my first son, which was 10 years ago now, he was very concerned that we would have children's music that would fit our family aesthetic. And we kind of stumbled across you, and you guys were just beginning because your first record was in 2012. Right? Can you, right?
Yeah.
That
was our first adventure album. We had a few other before that, but that was the first one that was inspired by getting out and doing a camping trip.
Yeah, and so I remember being very pregnant and listening to you, and I knew I was having a boy, and you have a song on that album, Brother, which you guys are not actually brothers, but we can talk about that.
I'm gonna cry thinking about that.
And I remember thinking, I really hope I have brothers, which I did have another son.
Yeah.
And that album was the first time I heard children's music that I listened to without my kids around. Yeah. And I'm as we run through this episode, we're gonna do a little like NPR timeline of your album history here. That album, and I took notes, also has one of my favorite songs of all times, Roll on River, which the end of that song, and I wrote the lyric down, all about that, all the water never dies, it just changes form. That like hit me like a bag of bricks when I first heard it. And it was the first time I really, and Joe, you're a dad, so we'll get into this, but when you're a parent, you don't realize how much of it is raising spiritual beings. And, to have music like yours that can support you through that growth and the conversations is something that you and Justin have done so magnificently. And it's no wonder you have the incredible, community that you've cultivated over these years, because nobody else is doing what you're doing, which we'll get into. And I've had the chance to work with you guys a little bit, and there's a lot of timely things that songs that you guys have released, and I remember working on one specific song with you, which we'll get into to release, and it had an interesting reaction from people. I'm just like super excited to have you here today, so thank you for taking the time.
Olivia, thanks so much for saying all that. What a great intro. And Jenny, nice to meet you. And thanks you guys for being fans. And I'm excited to have this conversation with you. So we should jump in.
Yeah,
Awesome.
We're very excited. I have a video of me and Weston when he was about 2.5 at one of your shows. And I'm like, do you think I'm the only really like big Okee Dokee brother aunt here? And he was like, yeah, I do. I think you're the only one that's like the aunt that's like here on her own volition, basically. I was like, can I come?
Nice.
Anyway, we are so excited to have you here today. How are you doing today?
Today is a good day. Yeah, we are in this 2-week period in Minnesota where the weather is just perfect, not too hot, not too cold. And so you got to really take advantage of getting out there. So I've had a nice morning walk with my wife, and our kid went off to kindergarten. And feeling good to be having this conversation with you guys. It's cool to talk about the music on a level where people resonate with it, see their kids getting into these conversations about how we relate to each other in relationships, but also on a spiritual level. And since you guys have listened on that deep level, I'm excited to have this conversation. Sometimes the conversations can be a little superficial, but this one,
let's go.
We're here to cry. We're gonna cry. It's gonna get real. Anyway, this is perfect. Why don't you take us back to the beginning of your Fresh Start story?
That sounds good. Well, honestly, there have been a few fresh starts throughout the whole process of not just, the Okee Dokee Brothers, but adulthood in general. Because I've noticed they kind of spiral through life, where you'll go through one and then need to revisit that fresh start later. So I'll start with kind of one of the beginnings of how the band started and a big shift that happened for me personally during that time. And then, maybe later we can talk about how that has come back time and again to kind of revisit the lessons of what happened there. But the fresh start happened back in about 2008 or 9. It was maybe a year-long process of kind of coming to a realization that the old band we were in, playing kind of bluegrass, folk, even a little bit of rock music in there, at bars that kind of went late into the evening, was probably not the healthiest decision for where I was at. I can speak for myself. Justin seemed to do pretty good in those situations, but I was burning the candle on both ends. Is that what they say?
Yeah, that is what they say. Yes.
Yeah. And we were kind of starting the kids project a little bit. We'd go into libraries or schools or do some park performances, but we were also still doing the quote unquote adult band, for bars at night. And I would get up early and like have to play these kids shows after a night of drinking and partying with friends and singing songs about whiskey and whatever. And then I just realized, the energy of the family friendly performances, getting kids up dancing to bluegrass music and stomping, was just so much more positive and life-giving for where I was at. And actually noticed, there was some health issues with sleep and drinking and whatnot. And just like anybody that goes through this process, an awareness that some amount of honesty with yourself and with your relationships just wasn't where I wanted it to be. So I kind of played that tape out of the future of what this looks like if I keep doing this. And it wasn't something I was interested in. That was something I wanted to make a change for, a fresh start. So actually, that's where I decided to kind of kick the habit of going to the bar at night and drinking. And I went into the 12-step program and, got involved with a sponsor and groups, AA groups and whatnot. And it's been such a good decision for my health and creativity, and energy and my relationships, to be honest, with my coworker, Justin, my bandmate, my best friend, my lifelong friend, my brother, as I call him. And yeah, through kind of dating during that time and finding a partner, and also just, the path to consistency with my creative practice, writing songs and showing up for shows with good energy. So we can get into some details around that, but that's where it began, kind of having this shift. And that's when the Okee Dokee Brothers started, digging down on songwriting and getting some good, upbeat and fun songs, but also some songs that resonate with all ages. And Justin walked that path with me. And, now it's been about 13 or 14 years of sobriety and family music. And haven't really looked back. It's the lessons I've learned through the steps have been super helpful throughout the years. And like I said before, I continue to revisit those things and need to kind of have a fresh start on, working the steps again, or even with my relationship with my wife, doing things that really give a fresh look, a zoom out look of like, okay, let's take an inventory of where we are, check in with our higher power and see, are we connecting? Are we being honest? And of course, this is a daily practice too, but sometimes when things kind of like during the pandemic for our family, things got pretty stressful, like many families, and I needed to do kind of a restart on that too. So anyway, that might bring up some questions. But where I see us maybe being able to talk about how some of those lessons come out through art as an interesting topic for this conversation, because I'm always surprised how I'll write a song and not really know really what it's about until it's out. And then I realize like, wow, okay, so this was me kind of processing addiction and dependency, recovery, the steps and all that. And it seems like a heavy topic for a children's song or a family album, but somehow in this one that we just put out, which is called Brambletown, we were able to kind of go through some of those deeper moments in life through a lens of some critters in the woods, and hopefully it's resonating with people.
I mean, the reality is kids are dealing with this stuff in one way or another, right? Like many children have a parent that is in active addiction or in recovery from addiction, and it is a fallacy to pretend that like we can protect them from that. And we just introduce that when they turn 18, we hand them a book and we say, here's all the problems of the world, you know? And so I think your music, I know, you know, Olivia, like as she mentioned with divorce and stuff like that, like it really resonates and it deals with these issues, and it does a wonderful, beautiful introduction of things that are going on, because it can be so easy to feel isolated as a child when you're going through that stuff.
That's right. Yeah. And that's the other part of this album story. You know, the general theme was kind of disconnection that we're feeling through materialism and maybe some things with addiction or dependency, and then also a song about divorce. And I know you guys focus on that on this podcast in such a beautiful way and a necessary way to take the taboo away from it. Let's talk about it. Let's bring this up in kids that even haven't even experienced it personally, but of course in their school and their friends, this is something that happens. And there's many ways to look at it, but the point is to bring it to the surface. Here's a children's song about it. Justin, I'll speak for him for just a second, because I did get permission from him to mention this. He couldn't be here today, but he went through a separation, and he put that experience into a song called The Fox and the Hare. You know, two critters kind of from two different walks of life, and that was part of his story with his ex-wife, and he wrote a song that was super beautiful about it. And we had a moment where we thought, is this okay to put on a kid's album? Is it too sad? Is it okay? And of course we did decide, yeah, this is a conversation that needs to be had, and it's sad, but it's also incredibly beautiful to watch the cycles of love.
That song, first of all, we'll dig into the song right now. That song is probably one of my, and you have some beautiful songs out there. I mean, I literally, you should see my list of songs I want to talk about. You sent me the early track, like a early release of this Brambletown, and I was walking on our streets. I walk every morning like you do, and I came upon The Fox and the Hare, and I was weeping, Joe, weeping.
Yeah, I knew you would resonate with that one. You know, when I sent that link to you.
Yeah, thank you. I think I even texted you back, and I was like, "Are you trying to murder me?" The last line of the song, which is, "And one day songbirds will sing again inside your heart." I mean, there's so many things I want to talk about with your music specifically. You know, the music that you and Justin write is truly, I think, one of the nuggets, right, is hope, right? You give people hope. Speaking of hope, right, you released Songs for Singing in 2020, just as the pandemic came out, and Hope Machine, which is my favorite song from that album, it kept us going, right? I mean, that's literally all we had was hope during that time, right? And so when I was listening to The Fox and the Hare, I'm gonna just say it's a perfect song. Like no notes on that song, because it takes these two critters, right? And it's like they really did love each other, but things change, right? And it's like, and what is he saying, darling, I won't be there, right, in the morning? And that's how you feel. Like you're like, wait, where did they go? Right? Where is that person that I once loved? And that sometimes love doesn't mean till death do us part. I mean, like really, like, I mean, that song is just like I truly think everybody needs to listen to that song, because it really like captures that feeling of you fall in love, and then something shifts, right? And and the way that you wrote it all through kind of, the nature symbolism and the animals and this idea of the songbirds, because that is when you fall in love, you really feel like there's songbirds playing. So truly, truly, well, we'll obviously link to all of this, but that is one of my favorite songs that you guys have ever written. And I think there has not been, it's so hard, let me put it this way, to find resources for children that celebrate and honor divorce. And by hard, I mean there's none. There's none.
Mm.
I remember, my ex-husband moved away. He left the state, and I was trying to find books for my kids who were like, at the time 3 and 5 about, divorce and things. And the only books were about people like dying, right? Like there's like nothing about like and divorce, 50% of families get divorced, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's millions and millions of kids living in single parent families, and yet we're not talking about it with the kids. And it's just fascinating to me that this is the one piece, the one resource that really has celebrated family and that love is love. And I think you guys should be so proud of it, because Brambletown in itself is a very deep album. And I think what you have done with music generally is that you respect children to the utmost degree.
Yeah.
And you see them as full people. So I want to go back a little bit. My 9-year-old had a question, which was, how did you get started in children's music? And so I have seen YouTube videos of you guys. I think you lived in Brooklyn. Am I right?
Yeah, we were there I think I was there for a winter, and then Justin lived in Queens for about 6 years.
So I remember seeing some YouTube videos of you guys making music back in the day. So first of all, how did you and Justin meet, and kind of your origin story? And then how did you get into where you are now?
Right. So we grew up together. So I've known Justin since I was 3 years old, and we met in our little kind of childcare center or something. Our sisters were friends at their kindergarten class. And so we always joke, we didn't really have a say in the matter. Our families were friends. So we were just put together. And our families had, holidays together, and we would just grew up playing catch out back and going on camping trips with our families. And our sisters were really close friends. So that's why we call each other brothers, is we've just always kind of been each other's brothers to play with out back and whatnot. And we were into adventure, and we like it says in our bio, we'd go exploring the neighborhood together and always find something to get into. Our parents let us kind of roam around. And so those were the kind of neighborhood memories of bonding. And then, when we got older, we would take these long camping trips and sit around the fire. And one time I brought a guitar up there, and I had learned some John Denver songs. And, that was a very meaningful experience where we felt like, it's almost like a spiritual experience, honestly, where we felt connected to something bigger and something moving through us. Something was strumming the guitar, something was singing along. Yeah. And when you have an experience like that, you don't really, forget about it. And
we understand that.
Yeah. So, these are so powerful that we still draw from that energy when we write a song. Of course, that's some nostalgia, but it's also, just the truth of being, seen and heard and present with somebody, in nature like that is just a powerful thing that goes back into ancient times, and telling stories around the fire and singing songs and being vulnerable and open and expressing yourself. So when those things happened, we knew we wanted to share that with people. And so we started actually being camp counselors. That was one of our first jobs. Had a camp up in the Rocky Mountains, and we really got into, of course we were singing songs and stuff, but we got into like skits and ghost stories, and we were just really creative counselors. And in some people's opinion, we took things way too far for those kids. I think some of the kids are still traumatized from some of the ghost stories.
But they're traumatized by Grammy-award winners. Okay,
that's right. Yeah, we would get really into these stories. We'd paint a whole picture of a giant scene of what happened at this camp, and we'd have people in costumes on the other side of the river acting like ghosts, and like kids were screaming. And anyway, we get involved, right? And I don't need to get into all that, but we loved being with kids, getting creative, singing songs, and those summers were so fun at camp that we said, well, let's keep this going. We for a while were in, like I said, kind of like we had a 6-piece band where we toured around playing bars, and we also did like community events for that, and occasionally there would be like kids hanging out at those, and we had to change the set list a bit when we did like family stuff. And so we had a bar set list, and then we had a family friendly set list where we cut out all the drinking songs basically. And we just started loving that set list, because it tapped into our goofy nature, and we could be a little bit more ourselves, which is, the truth is we're not like hillbillies riding the rails and drinking whiskey. We're guys that grew up in a neighborhood and like to camp and tell jokes. So that felt real to us. And so we just leaned into writing songs that had a lighthearted nature, that connected folks to the outdoors, and we had some families resonate with it, so we just kept at it. And that's the little short history of our band.
So you have a question, Jenny?
Yeah, I mean, you and Justin are so close and you're brothers, and we always get asked this question because we're sisters and we work together. Like, what's that been like? What's it been like creating with him? Are there, one of the benefits of Olivia and I is we have really different skill sets, so we sort of complement each other in that way. I would love to hear a little bit about that experience of like, it's hard when your best friend, because Olivia and I are very close, is like also the person that you work with, because there's no boundaries, like there's no work-life balance. We're living together right now, and like at like 10 o'clock at night, we're like, okay, we got to stop working. So I'm curious what that's like.
Well, that's amazing, first of all, to hear you guys doing that. Then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about here. Because Justin and I, we have different skill sets too, which is really nice. We do complement each other well in that regard, and I'm grateful for that, and so is he. We continually acknowledge each other's strengths in that and show our gratitude. That's a huge step for us. It's just like, with a little bit of that, we can really be in a healthy state. I think that needs to be a practice for us. Nothing to like force that, but like when we both hear that, it just gives us so much more leeway with each other. But there are times where that gratitude or acknowledgement runs thin, and I don't know if it's, old like competitive energy or something that comes up from childhood, or maybe there's these moments, again, where both of us are in therapy and we're always kind of thinking about childhood conditioning or shame that comes up, and he reflects on me and I reflect on him. So if we're not in touch with our own kind of confidence and self-love, and the other one does something that triggers, like, oh, that makes me feel self-conscious or something, we both have this, like anybody, we kind of offload that discomfort or that shame on each other, right? And that can be really hard. This is something we've noticed we do with our wives and kids, and we see other people doing it, and it's like, okay, this is a pattern that really can only be helped by doing our individual work with our inner child. And we have our own healthy behaviors, our healthy kind of practices that we go up and down on. Like, we're not at all perfect on this, but when we are being present to ourselves and meditating or doing some yoga or exercise or just getting that alone time, the boundaries are so much easier to set, and they're so much more loving than the reactive stuff that happens. And so we've been, obviously, we've been through a lot of those tougher times where we get a little frustrated with each other and like distance ourselves. And then we've been through times where we feel, like we're back in our friendship, that's just like, forget about the business. We're here for each other. We're not a band. We're not a company. We're a friendship. And beautiful car rides of honesty and openness that we're there for each other. But I will say, the quote unquote business side of things can be stressful, and it doesn't leave a lot of room for that personal connection. So we have to be intentional about making room for it, or else things get a little stiff.
Yeah. I was going to ask that too. You guys are, musicians, you're artists. It's hard to make money, right, in this world right now for everybody. You have pretty much run the business, I think, right, by yourselves, right?
Well, yeah, we manage the label and the band, but we have help through a booking agent and a PR person and an accountant. We have folks that kind of like help us do the things that we aren't so great at, which is really helpful. But for the most part, we're getting back to emails and kind of like booking hotels and rental cars.
You do your social media, like you're engaged with your people.
It's a lot. Yeah. I also wonder, like, Olivia and I always joke that I'm 35. So we've had 35 years of like working on communication between the two of us. So like, I imagine you and Justin have all this history of like good and bad, probably mostly good, of communicating. And I also wonder, because I feel like this, how that, sort of relating to somebody for 30 plus years, right? As you guys have both been, it's a really long-term relationship, and how that sort of informs or doesn't inform your marriage. Like, and you don't have to get into that too much, but I always feel like, having had my relationship with my sister, knowing how to communicate with her, it makes sense to me that the person that I'm engaged to is a lot like Olivia, like in a lot of ways. So I wonder if that informs your marriages at all.
Yeah, a little bit. It's kind of interesting. My wife, Allison, has a lot of similarities with Justin. And we balance each other out in similar ways. Obviously, a lot of differences too. But I would say the biggest challenge there is like, Justin, I've known Justin for my whole life, and this band is how we make a living. So it's how, for me, the challenge is just like how to prioritize the marriage and our family life over this other aspect that does creep into my personal time, because creativity doesn't just show up during work hours. I'm like, get a song idea and I want to kind of follow that energy. But I've noticed I've had to also just like set that aside a little bit. If I'm in a moment where I really need to show up for my wife or my kid, and that's just been a little bit of a balancing act. Like, I can't chase every song idea, and I can't make every little, business idea happen to full fruition if I'm going to be present with my family. And I'm a person that likes to focus and like get things done all the way. So it's been quite a challenge just to say, like, even though I could do that right now, I'm going to choose something else because it's really important and my family needs to be the priority. I'm still in the middle of like letting all of that sink in. It seems like it would be easy and I could say that I'm good at it, but actually I'm not that good at it.
No, and I'm not either.
I mean, I'm moving to a different country basically so that we can have space. I mean, not so that we can, but it's like I'm moving to a different country, and like it's amazing because it gives us space away from each other. I'm going to be in a different time zone, and when I've been there before in Scotland, like it's a 5-hour time difference, and so it's great because like we kind of have to separate, but it's really hard when you're so close to somebody and you're like, your futures are locked together, right? In a very like business oriented way. It's tough.
Well, what do we always say?
Like you said, creatively, it's tough.
We always say like the next best thing to being married to your sibling is running a business with them, right? Because it's like
as intimate,
right? And like you said, Joe, like that's your livelihood, right? Like, so you and Justin have to have this force that you put into the world, right?
Yeah.
So you can support your family. But I very much hear you, like as an entrepreneur and a founder, you know, when I'm with my kids, it's not like my brain turns off, right? I'm like, I got to post this on social and I got to have this idea for this in the next book and this is that. And it's really hard, right, to balance all of that. How, you know, we've talked to a couple of musicians on the show who are parents also. How do you feel like becoming a dad has influenced your music?
Yeah. Well, it's been so great. You know, Hap is a really creative, fun kid,
So
and
cute.
he brings out, well, when he was a baby, you know, I had a whole different energy about it too. I was writing very like sweet, calm lullaby songs, and yeah, that energy was so good for me to embrace. And I can still, you know, access that as a songwriter that I didn't quite have that emotional capacity before having a kid. I don't think. Maybe I did. It really brought it out. And now, you know, he's in a stage, he's 6 now, and we tell stories every night. And I got really into like these old myths with him that we tell, kind of these ancient stories that pull up like archetypes of different types of characters, and he loves it and I love it. And yeah, it's informed also another just realm of creativity and energy that I didn't know I had, you know, an interest in, that I'm kind of putting into some of these songs. I mean, Brambletown is partially that, you know, it's like an otherworld type situation where like it's very character focused and there's archetypes and different weaving storylines. And yeah, part of that was just getting into stories with Hap and getting on his level and seeing the, you know, profound nature of some of these stories, reading books with him and reflecting on, you know, this quote unquote children's art form is just as deep as anything else. If you think about it, like Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and even like the parables in the New Testament, it's like these are children's stories more or less. But they and you think about some of the stories you hear in like the Taoist tradition or the Buddhist tradition, they're accessible and simple, but like as you dig into them, the profundity, you know, the depth is just like mind-blowing. And so those are inspiring pieces of art to try to create. Of course, we get nowhere close to some of the old ancient things that have been passed down, but we look to those to show like it is possible to write a seemingly simple something and have it hold a lot of wisdom.
You know, it's so interesting because I found for me, parenting is really about reparenting myself. Do you feel like you're reparenting parts of you when you write a lot of this music?
Yeah. What you just said really struck a chord, because there's just so much in me that needs to be heard and seen and held. And in making this art, sometimes when I sing these songs, I'm in relationship with that person who feels some healing come from those things. And it's a slow road, and I have to be mindful of that work that I'm doing. But yeah, there is some reparenting going on, much needed. I mean, I had a great childhood, and I don't, you know, necessarily like blame anybody for any of the
I mean, we all need to reparent ourselves, you
I
know, and I think
carry.
and I think that's why I listen to your music without the kids around all the time, because there's a lot of stories in there, you know, that really help me reparent myself and tap into those emotions that I wouldn't necessarily, you know, tap into otherwise. And you know, I think like that's the whole thing with like gentle parenting, right? It's like it's really talking to ourselves and that little person inside of us. Maybe that's your next album, Joe. You gotta
Yeah, that's good. Well, it does. While we're on that subject, I want you to keep your question right there. But the thing that brings up in Brambletown for me is there's these 3 songs, Dr. Mole's Apothecary and Old Badger and The Life That's in You, that are kind of connected. And if you listen to those 3 songs in a row, you kind of see how they apply to what we were just talking about. First of all, kind of realizing that the healing is in you, is part of Dr. Mole's message to Badger and to all of us, that we kind of have to go back and unearth this pain so that it doesn't, last and own us. We dig deep with Dr. Mole and find that like we have the capacity to reparent ourselves or give ourselves that self-love. And so Badger, hears that, doesn't really understand what it means. It's the exact same thing that happened with me. It's like, okay, that's a great thought, but you have to almost go through your own underworld to figure out what that actually means. And so Badger's song is about, getting addicted to maple syrup and having a hole in his heart. He goes to the doctor. I have this hole in my heart and I have dust in my soul. Like, what do I do? And her advice is clean up your messings, count your blessings, and face down your fear. So, this is a nod to the 12 steps, how they can kind of be summarized in some of these types of things, like clean house and help others and trust God. And then he goes and has an experience on Mulligan's Hill or Mulligan's Cliff. He's up there and he's, facing down his fear and like looking at death and going through somewhat of an initiation, and just being, meditating, being okay with himself and getting in touch with that light in his soul. And what he ends up kind of figuring out in that song is that he doesn't need to heal the hole in his heart. It's that the light can shine through that when he can get that light to shine. And that's just the thing with life and all these struggles we go through. It's not to like be perfect and fix everything. It's to be okay letting your light shine through the imperfections, right? And the cracks in the vessel. And that's how we share our pain as love. And so Badger gets there, and then The Life That's in You is the final song in the little trilogy, because it says, and not only that, but that light is connected to all living beings around us, and it comes into you and through you through a life force that's in the trees and the rocks and the breeze. And some people call that God, and some people call that the animate force, or presence. There's a lot of words for it, but that is what we get to, have in us and through us if we're open and if we're vulnerable through this process of suffering and pain, that we can say, yeah, that was hard, and you're going through something hard too. Well, we have the same thing in us, and let's show each other like this light and share it with each other, like you guys are doing today on this podcast with the topic of divorce and whatnot. It's just, you're willing to go there, and that's why these conversations can happen.
But like, seriously, who else is writing music for this, for children about this? I mean, that for anyone about
for anybody,
that. That's the deep. That I mean, like that is like religion right there. Like that is like, that faith, is that's faith, that's hope, that's connection, right? Like, and what else are we supposed to be teaching our children but that? Right. So like, for anybody listening, you have to go buy
it's much better.
Yeah. First of all,
I was gonna say it's much better than what we listened to as children with our parents, which was like Taj Mahal, which was mostly inappropriate, and a lot of like Aqualung, which was also very inappropriate, Jethro Tull for children. This is way better to listen to with your kids.
I think children innately, right, have a spiritual sense about them. And they wonder, right? Children wonder. And I'm literally looking down at Brambletown's song list. Little Dipper and Big Dipper is another one of those songs, and it also makes me cry, where it's like, the world is so big, the universe is so big, where is my place? And so like, but all of this, with old Badger and with the hole in his heart and with the light shining through, I mean, and like, that's so Leonard Cohen, right? First of all, it's like all this stuff, right? And I mean, which is Jenny's favorite, but like,
it's one of my favorite lines is there is a crack in all things. That's how the light gets in, right? Like,
but like, to bring this to children and say, I respect that you understand, right, that this is going on in your world is huge. It's really huge. I want to talk before, I know we have to let you go, but I have two quick songs I want to talk about. We had Zach from Dust Bowl Revival on the show.
Cool.
And he talked a lot about how, as the political spectrum is changing and the world is changing, they decided to take the stand, right, politically, and talk about the things that they want to talk about. And there's a couple songs that you guys have, and Saddle Up came out in 2016, which coincided with the election of somebody we will not name. There's a song on there, Shooting Star, which I come back to a lot, especially now with the world the way it is, and a lot of things happening, unfortunately. And in Shooting Star, it's really about putting your guns down. And then also Snow People, which I had the pleasure of helping you guys do some influencer stuff on. And I remember doing that with you. And you got some pushback on Snow People because it's about gender constructs, right? And it's about kind of, I mean, I literally wrote down your line, right? Why do we roll people up, circles up into squares, right? What have you and Justin kind of collectively, right, as a brand, as an ethos, what have you decided on, right? Kind of like as you move forward with the company when it comes to things like this that are a little political? Because I know we've done our own stuff, with Fresh Starts. We're like, where do we stand on all these things?
Yeah.
What have you decided? What has come about over the years? Because obviously you two are not, you've also, and I correct me if I'm wrong, but you had something with the Grammys. Was it Grammys or was it an awards that you guys decided?
Yep.
So talk a little bit about that, because you definitely use your voice, and I think that that's so important for children to hear too.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting question, and thanks for bringing it up like that. It's a journey of how to express on this level where you realize, how much of a voice you're giving certain topics, which is super important. Like the gender issue at that time, of course, just needed people talking about it and looking at it in a different way. I don't think in that song we're telling anybody what to do and what's right and what's wrong. We're just saying let's rethink it.
Yeah, you're asking
and
questions.
Be open. Yeah, we are. Exactly. We're asking questions, and same with Shooting Star. We're not saying make guns illegal. We're saying let's put down the gun and pick up the 6-shooter and pick up the 6-string guitar. And it's just a little way of saying, like, doesn't it feel good to pick up the guitar? And doesn't it feel good to ask questions that are just assumed that boys are like this and girls are like this? Okay. That can be true. It can also be, we can also open our minds up to a different way of doing that. And of course, people read into it as like full on political propaganda, and we expect that. And actually, we appreciate some of the emails we get or comments on social media that bring to light the other side. We don't want to shut down that conversation. I think there are certain comments that don't lead to like an actual dialogue that we tend to just like read and not engage with. But we're not saying we're right about all of this, but what we are saying is let's open up, let's have hard conversations. I don't think that those types of things are off limits to kids. They're going to have those conversations in their classroom when pronouns are brought up or any number of things. And it's like, let's just be open to, why is it compassionate to see where somebody's coming from in that situation and do some gesture to make people feel included. It's a good conversation to have. So where we continue to go on that as things get more and more political and divided is, do we want to keep adding to kind of these things that seem to resonate with the echo chamber of liberals and get pushback from the conservatives? Or do we want to keep going deeper into something that we can all connect on? And nature is something we can all connect on. And some sort of spiritual energy that connects us is something that we can all connect on and appreciate. We're interested in that right now because it doesn't seem like it's a divisive thing. I've talked to many people that you would think I wouldn't agree with politically or with some different social understandings or whatever, or even religious understandings, that like we can get somewhere when we talk about the beauty in, surrendering to the force behind all living things. And that's why we wrote what we wrote for this album, because we want to be more healing and connecting than saying like taking a firm stance that is going to make people like angry. And maybe there needs to be that too. And I think we're going to probably continue to stand up for things that we like the Grammy decision. We declined a Grammy nomination because we saw some real like racial bias going on with the committee that decides those things. And it was a trend, and we just wanted to bring that to attention. And if we see things like that, of course, we're going to stand up for that. I just also think there's another level of also trying to not lose that middle ground of connection that is so important for all of us to be doing, so that we can see the humanity in each other if we're ever going to move forward undivided,
Yeah, and I think it also goes back to parenting, right? We don't know who our children are going to be as they grow. And so keeping kind of a middle ground stance as a parent, right? You don't know who your child's going to grow up and they're going to want to do this or do that. And, kind of like that I love that about, everybody can kind of connect with nature and some sort of spirit. And like that is true. And I think I love too that you're showing families and children that it's okay to have a voice and to speak up on issues. And the thing like with Snow People is literally is all just questions, right? It's okay to ask questions, and I think it's so important. So Joe, if anybody's going through a fresh start, what would be some wise words that you could impart to them?
Yeah, well, I would say, it's always good. A good reminder from myself that I forget a lot is just to kind of do your work, right? And see where you need to bring self-love and connection with your inner divinity or inner child, and really spend the time being present to yourself, giving you the self-care and the time you need to have that firm foundation. And then, from there, you can kind of start making changes or decisions or whatnot. I think during a fresh start, it's maybe easy to start saying like extreme things about other people or things you don't want anymore or whatever. But, it's just cultivating that connection to self is always a good place to go to when things are a little rocky and unsure, right? Because that's where we find truth and trust with yourself. So I don't know if that's like incredibly too general or something, but that's where my mind goes.
And then our last question, what was the last thing that you ate and truly loved?
Oh yeah. Well, I really like enchiladas, and if a restaurant really is good at making mole, I will lean into that. And I just had some really good enchiladas de mole at a Mexican restaurant, and I was happy about that.
Speaking of which, we didn't even get into it. We're gonna have to have you guys. I needed to have Justin on too, because we didn't even get into like your whole thing with like cultures and introducing kids to different cultures and histories,
right.
all of that.
Yeah.
I literally have Sister Moon and Brother Sun is one of my favorite songs. So you guys have to come back on. But
yeah, for sure.
What is
this has been great.
What's coming up next for you guys? What can we look forward to?
Good question. Well, we just released this one. We're writing songs right now. Our process is usually just like writing a bunch of songs, see what theme comes up. Let the songs kind of decide which thread is interesting and resonating with us. So we're in that phase of just trying lots of things and seeing what we're interested in, reading books, going on trips and adventures, meeting different people, having conversations like this, and finding what's resonating out there.
And you have some shows coming up, I know.
Yeah, I think we do. Throughout the spring and summer, we're out there. I never really have these things front of mind.
Because I don't know when this is coming out, so don't worry about that.
You show up when you show up.
I do know that one of my best friends just texted me literally yesterday, and she's like, "Oh my God, the Okee Dokee!" She's in Illinois. She's like, "The Okee Dokee Brothers are coming right where I am," and I was like, "Literally, Joe is coming on the podcast tomorrow."
Nice.
So it was awesome.
Oh yeah.
You have to come back because there's so much more to dig into. But just thank you for taking the time, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing what you're doing, because I know as a creator, sometimes you're like in your house and you're creating and you're like, does anybody hear me? Does anybody know what I'm doing? And like, I just really want you to understand, like, you are making a huge impact on the world and on the future generations of children who are listening to your music. So, much love to you and Justin. And I'm proud to call you friends and to, be in your orbit and watch you guys as you explode, into the ether. You haven't done a album about like outer space yet.
Yeah, we're getting there.
You need to go do that. You need to go.
You have to go into outer space, and then you have to write the album.
Cosmic psychedelic music.
Canoe, the cosmic canoe.
It's when you guys grow your hair out. You're like Sergeant Pepper, Right.
Yeah, we've always wanted to do a Grateful Dead cover band for kids.
Garcia.
Yes. I love it. I remember when she found you guys and she was like, listen to this music. And I was like, why did somebody make a music, like an album specifically for your family? Why is there a band specifically created for your family? I was so confused.
Yeah.
So, as they grow up.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, hey, Jenny and Olivia, you guys, I really appreciate your dynamic and the container of what you've created here on your podcast. It's a cool premise, fresh starts and going someplace where I think a lot of people are getting hope from listening to other people go through hard things. And so I appreciate you guys asking such good questions and listening to the music.
Well, thank you. It's all about Hope Machine, right?
That's right.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you for listening to today's story. We're always here and we're proud of you.
A Fresh Story is produced by Fresh Starts Registry, the first and only platform for everything you need to begin again. You can read the show notes and learn more about today's episode at afreshstory.com.
As always, we want to remind our listeners that while we strive to provide accurate and helpful information, we are not medical doctors or mental health professionals. We want to remind you all that the information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for professional advice. We highly recommend consulting a qualified healthcare or mental health professional for any concerns or questions you may have. Remember, we are a podcast, but we are not licensed medical professionals. Always consult with your healthcare provider for any medical decisions. And as a gentle reminder, all opinions are our guests and do not necessarily reflect our own.